The termination letter was still warm from the printer when Seth Holloway set it down on his supervisor's desk, picked up his hard hat, and walked out of the Brampton processing plant without saying a word to anyone. He did not slam the door. He did not look back. He carried nothing except a crumpled grocery list his 8-year-old daughter Mia had tucked into his jacket pocket that morning: milk, orange juice, the cereal with the bear on the box, because she always worried he would forget. Outside, the November air hit him like cold water. He stood in the parking lot for a long moment, watching his own breath disappear into the gray sky above the factory floor, where he had spent the last 14 years of his life. People who saw him leave said he looked calm, almost peaceful. They had no idea. Seth had started at Pinnacle Food Solutions at 23, straight out of a 2-year technical program at Sheridan College. He was hired as a junior maintenance technician, the guy nobody called unless something had already broken badly enough to slow production. Over the years, he had quietly become something else entirely. The person management depended on when the automated conveyor systems seized, when the cold storage compression units failed during summer peak, when the packaging line threw errors that the manual could not explain. He had rebuilt entire mechanical systems from the ground up. He had once kept a critical refrigeration unit running for 11 hours with a piece of copper tubing and 2 clamps he found in a storage room, saving the company an estimated $400,000 in spoiled product. He received a $300 bonus and an email. He did not complain. That was not Seth's way. He showed up every day, signed in at 5:47 a.m. because his shift started at 6, and he liked the quiet of the parking lot before the rest of the crew arrived. He learned every machine in the plant by feel. The way a musician learns an instrument. Not just what it was supposed to do, but how it sounded when something was starting to go wrong. The slight vibration shift that came 3 days before a bearing failed. The hitch in the conveyor rhythm that meant the tension cable needed adjustment before the next shift. His supervisor, a man named Colton Briggs, knew exactly what Seth was worth. Which is why, when the plant manager announced layoffs in October, Colton quietly made sure Seth's name was not on the list. Then Colton retired in November, and the new operations director, a woman transferred from the Toronto corporate office, who had never worked a floor shift in her life, looked at Seth's file and saw a maintenance technician who had been at the same pay grade for 4 years without a promotion, and assumed he had plateaued. She put his name on the second list. Seth found out on a Tuesday. He did not argue. He signed the paperwork, collected his personal items, a photograph of Mia taken at the Niagara Butterfly Conservatory, a coffee mug with a broken handle he kept meaning to replace, a small framed quote his late wife Donna had cut from a magazine and told him to put somewhere he could see it every day. And he left. The quote said, "Some people carry the whole thing, they just never make a sound." Donna had known him well. She had died 22 months earlier, in February, from an aortic aneurysm that came without warning on a Wednesday afternoon. She was 37, Mia was 6. Seth had been in the middle of a floor shift when his phone rang, a number he did not recognize, and a voice he would never forget said there had been an incident at the Walmart on Queen Street, where Donna worked part-time in the pharmacy. He drove there. He sat in a waiting room. A doctor came out and used words that didn't reach him in any order that made sense. He drove home. Mia was at the neighbor's house. He sat at the kitchen table alone for 2 hours, before he went to pick her up, and when she ran across the yard toward him she stopped in the middle of the lawn, because she could read something in his face she had never seen before. She was 6 years old, and she just stopped. "Daddy," she said. He got down on one knee in the neighbor's front yard, in the cold, and he held her for a long time. He did not cry. He told himself he would later, when she was asleep. Later never really came. There was always something else. The school schedule, the lunches, the parent-teacher meetings he had never attended before, the forms he didn't know existed. The bedtime routines Donna had always handled, and that he learned one painful trial-and-error evening at a time. He watched YouTube videos to learn how to braid hair. He bought the wrong kind of juice box twice before Mia patiently explained that the ones with the green lid tasted like medicine. He kept working. He kept showing up at 5:47. And then, on a Tuesday in November, he didn't have anywhere to show up anymore. The first 2 weeks after the layoff, Seth held himself together through sheer routine. He drove Mia to school at 8:15, came home, made calls about employment insurance, sent out applications, fixed a neighbor's furnace for $200 cash. At night, after Mia fell asleep on the couch, with her head on his leg, because she still did not like sleeping alone. Since her mother died, he sat in the kitchen, with the bills spread out on the table, and did the arithmetic that never came out right. He told Mia he was between jobs. She nodded like she understood, but that weekend she brought him a drawing she had made at school. It was a picture of their apartment building, and in it, he was standing outside with what appeared to be a lunchbox. Underneath, she had written, in her careful printed letters, "My dad is the best fixer. He can fix anything." He put it on the fridge beside the grocery list. He applied to 18 positions over the next 3 weeks. He heard back from 4. 2 were in cities 2 hours away. 1 was a contract position with no benefits and a start date 6 months out. 1 was a junior technician role that paid $12 an hour less than he had been making. He took it anyway. He needed something. Not just for the money, he needed somewhere to be at 5:47 in the morning. Meanwhile, at the Pinnacle corporate office on Bay Street in downtown Toronto, something had gone quietly and catastrophically wrong. The company's new automated processing line, a flagship system installed at the Mississauga facility at a cost of $7 million, had been running with a persistent fault that nobody could isolate. The line would operate normally for 3 to 5 days, then produce a pressure irregularity in the sealing mechanism that resulted in compromised packaging. The product looked fine. The problem would not have been caught at all if a junior QC inspector named Tam hadn't noticed a pattern in the rejection data during a routine weekly review. The timing could not have been worse. Pinnacle's parent company had just signed a national distribution deal with one of the largest grocery chains in the country. A product recall, or worse, product reaching shelves with compromised seals, would be catastrophic. The contracts had penalty clauses. The reputational cost was harder to quantify, but not hard to imagine. The company brought in 2 outside contractors. Then a third. The systems manufacturer sent a senior technician from their facility in Germany, who spent a week on the floor and went home without a resolution. An engineering firm from Waterloo billed Pinnacle $80,000 for a diagnostic report that accurately described the problem and offered no solution. By mid-January, the board was asking questions that the executive team did not have good answers to. The CEO, a woman named Audra Fleming, had built her career in consumer goods operations. She was 51, pragmatic, and not the kind of person who panicked. But she was also not the kind of person who tolerated a problem sitting on her desk for 2 months without a resolution. She had taken over Pinnacle 3 years earlier and turned a flatlining quarterly loss into 2 consecutive years of growth. She did not have much patience for the phrase "we're working on it." When she asked her operations team directly why the problem persisted, a junior analyst, the kind of person who did not yet know he was not supposed to say certain things out loud, mentioned that the Brampton plant had recently let go a technician who apparently knew the older integration systems extremely well. Audra set down her coffee. "How recently?" she asked. "November," the analyst said. She looked at her VP of operations. The VP looked at the floor. "Get me his file," Audra said. Seth was under a kitchen sink in a rental unit in Etobicoke, replacing a corroded trap, when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He had been getting calls from recruiters lately, the automated kind that started with a 3-second pause, and then a voice that sounded vaguely offshore. He answered anyway, out of habit. "Is this Seth Holloway?" The voice was precise, no preamble. "Depends who's asking," he said, still on his back on the kitchen floor. "My name is Audra Fleming. I'm the chief executive of Pinnacle Food Solutions. I was hoping we could talk." He pulled himself out from under the sink. There was a pause. Then, "We have a problem with the Mississauga line. I understand you know the integration systems better than anyone we currently have on staff." "Probably true," Seth said. "I'd like to meet." "At your convenience." He looked around the kitchen. The tenant, an elderly man named Pete, was watching him from the doorway with the particular expression of someone who did not understand why a repair call had turned into what appeared to be a phone negotiation. "I can do Thursday," Seth said. "I was thinking tomorrow," Audra said. There was something in her voice that was not quite a request. "Tomorrow's fine," Seth said. He almost called back to cancel twice. The first time, he got as far as pulling up the number before Mia came into the kitchen, asking if he could help her with a project on the water cycle. And by the time he had found colored pencils and explained evaporation, he had forgotten what he was going to do. The second time was at 11 p.m. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, and he thought about the last 14 years. The 5:47 mornings, the $300 bonus. His name on a list assembled by a woman who had never set foot on the floor. He thought about Colton, who had known what he was worth, and protected him, and about what had happened the moment that protection disappeared. He thought, why would anything be different now? He put the phone down without calling. He was not sure if that was courage or stubbornness. He had been told they looked the same from the outside. The next morning he dropped Mia at school, went home to change his shirt, and drove downtown. The Pinnacle offices were on the 31st floor of a glass tower on Bay Street, the kind of building with a lobby that echoed, and a reception desk staffed by people who managed to make you feel slightly underdressed, no matter what you were wearing. Seth arrived in clean jeans and a gray button-down. He signed in. He waited 7 minutes. An assistant led him to a boardroom that looked out over the lake. Audra Fleming was already there. She was not what he had expected, though he was not sure what he had expected. She was shorter than she had sounded on the phone, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a folder open in front of her. She stood when he came in. She extended her hand. "Thank you for coming," she said. She sounded like she meant it. They sat. She did not waste time. She explained the problem with the Mississauga line in direct, technical terms, more technical than he had anticipated. She had done her homework. She described the fault sequence, the data from the diagnostic reports, the intervals at which the irregularity occurred. Seth listened without interrupting. Then he asked 3 questions. Then he sat back and said, "It's the sensor calibration on the secondary pressure manifold. The German system and the old integration software have a timing offset. Under normal load, it self-corrects. At peak run speed, which you'd hit during the new distribution volumes, the offset compounds. You get a false positive on the seal confirmation and the line keeps moving." The room was quiet. "The outside contractors missed it," Audra said. "They were looking at the hardware. The problems in the handshake between the software versions." He paused. "I knew that line had that issue. I flagged it 8 months ago in a maintenance report. I don't know what happened to it after that." Something passed across Audra's face. She glanced at the folder in front of her. "I found the report," she said quietly. "It was filed correctly. It went to someone who was supposed to escalate it." "They didn't," Seth said. "It was not a question." "They didn't," she agreed. There was a pause. Outside the lake was flat and silver under a gray January sky. "I'd like to offer you your position back," Audra said. "With adjustments. I want to talk about what those look like." Seth looked at his hands. He had spent 14 years in that plant. He had been good at his job, genuinely, quietly, exceptionally good, and the reward for that had been an email and a termination letter, from someone who had never learned his name. "I don't know if I want to go back," he said. It was the first time he had said that out loud. Audra did not argue. She said she understood, and she sounded like she meant that too. She said the offer would remain open, and gave him her direct number. He shook her hand and took the elevator back down to the lobby, and walked out into the January cold. He drove to the school, parked across the street, and waited for the end-of-day bell, even though he was 45 minutes early. When Mia came out, she saw his car immediately. She always did, and ran across the yard with her backpack bouncing and her coat half undone, because she never remembered to zip it. She pulled the car door open before he had fully stopped moving. "You're early," she said, climbing in. "I know. Did something happen?" "I had a meeting downtown." She buckled her seatbelt and looked at him. She had Donna's eyes, the particular way of looking at him that meant she was measuring something she hadn't decided to ask about yet. "Are you okay?" she said. "I'm thinking," he said. She nodded like that was a reasonable answer. "Can we get hot chocolate?" They got hot chocolate. They sat in the car in a Tim Hortons parking lot off Hurontario Street, and she told him about a boy in her class, who had brought a lizard for show and tell, and it had escaped under the reading corner, and the teacher had screamed. Seth laughed, actually laughed, the kind that comes up without warning, and Mia looked pleased with herself. On the way home she fell asleep in the back seat with her chin tucked into her collar. He looked at her in the rearview mirror, and thought about the grocery list still stuck to the fridge. He thought about the maintenance report that went nowhere, the 14 years, the bearing failures he had heard before anyone else, the $400,000 in saved product, and the email. He thought about what Donna would have said. She would not have told him to go back or not go back. She would have asked him what he was afraid of. Because Donna believed that under most decisions, if you dug far enough, there was something you were trying to avoid looking at directly. He knew what it was. He was afraid that if he went back, he would disappear into it again. The 5:47 mornings, the unreturned praise, the slow erosion of something he could not name. He was afraid because the last time, it had taken Donna dying for him to notice how far he had drifted from his own life. And he could not do that to Mia. He called Audra the next morning, before Mia was awake. "I have conditions," he said. "Tell me," she said. He had written them on the back of a hydro bill the night before. They were not unreasonable. They were, in fact, the most reasonable things he had ever asked for. No mandatory overtime without 72 hours notice. A direct line to the operations director, not filtered through middle management. Salary at market rate, for his actual skill level. And a commitment, in writing, that maintenance reports filed under his name would be tracked and acknowledged within 2 weeks of submission. He heard her writing. "There's one more thing," he said. "Go ahead. I need to be home by 5 p.m. 3 days a week. My daughter has activities, I'm not missing them." The pause was shorter than he expected. "That's manageable," Audra said. "It's not negotiable," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I didn't negotiate it." He started at the Mississauga facility on the first Monday of February. The problem with the secondary pressure manifold took him 4 days to isolate and correct. Not because it was complicated, but because he wanted to document every step carefully enough that anyone who came after him could follow the same logic without him in the room. He wrote a 16-page technical summary. He sent it to Audra. She acknowledged it within 24 hours, and forwarded it to the engineering team with a note that said, "This is the standard going forward." The line ran without fault for 3 consecutive weeks, then 4. The distribution deal held. The board questions stopped. In the meantime, Seth moved quietly through the facility the way he always had. He arrived, no longer at 5:47, because the new position was salaried and flexible, sometime around 7. He learned the Mississauga systems the way he had learned the Brampton ones. He started a maintenance log that was more detailed than anything the facility had used before, and he hired a junior technician named Kyle, a recent graduate from Conestoga, who reminded him a little of himself at 23, and spent 2 hours on his second day explaining to Kyle that the most important thing in the building was not the machines. It was the sounds they made when something was starting to go wrong. Kyle wrote it down. Seth wasn't sure anyone had ever written anything he said down before. In April, Audra came to the Mississauga facility for an operations review. She spent most of the morning in the boardroom, with the regional directors and the financial team, the way executive visits usually went. Seth was on the floor. He didn't expect to see her. She found him after lunch, crouched beside a packaging unit he had been recalibrating, explaining something to Kyle, who was taking notes on his phone. She stood back, and watched for a moment before he noticed her. "How's it going?" she asked, when he stood up. "Good," he said. "Then, better. Kyle's going to be solid." She glanced at Kyle, who nodded and moved away with practiced unconvincing casualness. They walked along the floor together, which was unusual enough that a few people looked up. "I owe you an apology," Audra said. She said it the way she did most things, directly, without cushioning it first. "For the layoff. For the pattern that allowed the layoff. For 14 years of maintenance reports and $300 bonuses and decisions made by people who didn't know your name." She paused. "That was the company I took over. I've been working on changing it. I didn't change it fast enough to stop what happened to you." Seth was quiet for a moment. They were standing near the loading dock. Through the open doors, a transport truck was pulling in, and the cold March air was coming through with it. "People like you keep these places running," he said. "You know that, every plant, every facility, there's somebody like me in there. Nobody learns their name until something falls apart." "I know," she said. "So don't just fix my situation," he said. "Fix the system." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's what I'm trying to do," she said. He believed her. He wasn't entirely sure why. He was not by nature a person who trusted quickly. But there was something in the way she talked about the company that sounded less like executive performance, and more like someone who had been genuinely unsettled by something they had seen. He thought about the meeting on the 31st floor. The lake, gray and flat. The way she had said they didn't about the escalation failure, quietly, like it cost her something. "I know," he said. By May, something had changed at the facility that was harder to quantify than production output or seal failure rates. Workers who had been at Mississauga for years mentioned it to each other without quite being able to name it. Maintenance requests were now tracked. Responses were logged. When Seth submitted a report flagging a potential issue with the cold storage unit in Block C, it was acknowledged within a week and scheduled for inspection. The inspector found exactly what Seth had described. The repair was done before a failure occurred. That was not how it had ever worked before. Kyle told Seth one afternoon that he had heard people in the break room talking about the maintenance log, not complaining about it, which was the more common response to new systems, but saying that it made them feel like someone was actually paying attention. "That's the whole point," Seth said. The thing between Seth and Audra did not happen suddenly. It happened the way most real things do. Slowly, without announcement, in the gaps between other things. She called him occasionally with technical questions which became less and less technical as the months went on. He started returning those calls, without checking the time first, which was something he noticed only in retrospect. She mentioned once, during a call in late March, that she was eating lunch alone in her office again, and the way she said again had the particular flatness of someone describing a habit they had made peace with, but hadn't chosen. He thought about that for longer than he expected to. In April, he drove Mia to a robotics competition at a community center in Hamilton. The team she had joined through her school. A scrappy underfunded group of 9 and 10-year-olds, who had built a small sorting robot from a kit and an almost competitive amount of determination, placed third. Mia came in fourth in the individual technical explanation category, which meant she stood in front of a panel of judges and explained, calmly and in considerable detail, how the robot's sensor array worked. Seth stood in the back of the gym and watched her and thought, "She gets that from Donna, and maybe a little from me." He texted Audra a photo of Mia holding the third-place ribbon, because he had reached the point where that felt like a natural thing to do, and he did not examine it too closely. She called him back within 10 minutes. "She looks like she owns the room," Audra said. "She does," Seth said. "She doesn't know it yet, but she does." There was a pause, a comfortable one. "You sound different," Audra said. "Different how?" "Like someone who got some air." He looked across the gym, where Mia was now explaining the sorting robot to another kid's grandmother, with the patience of someone who genuinely believed this information mattered to the other person. "Yeah," he said. "I think I did." In June, on a Friday evening, he ran into Audra at a farmer's market in Mississauga. The kind of accidental collision that is almost certainly not accidental in retrospect, given that she did not live in Mississauga and had mentioned the market once in passing 3 weeks earlier. She was holding 2 peaches and looking at a display of locally made preserves, like she was making a difficult decision. He was holding Mia's hand. Mia was eating a corn cob with focused, unhurried commitment. The moment Audra saw them, she did the thing that powerful people almost never do, which is look momentarily unsure of herself. It lasted about 2 seconds. Then she smiled, and it was a different smile than the Bay Street boardroom version, smaller, less composed, more like something that had escaped rather than been deployed. "I didn't know you came here," she said. "First time," she said, which was true. Mia looked up from her corn. She regarded Audra with the frank, unfiltered assessment of an 8-year-old. "Are you my dad's boss?" she said. "Sort of," Audra said. "He talks about you," Mia said. Seth started to say something. Mia continued without looking at him. "He said you're the kind of person who actually does things instead of just talking about them." She considered this. "He doesn't say that about a lot of people." Audra looked at Seth. He looked at the preserves display with tremendous focus. "That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me this year," Audra said. Mia offered her a bite of corn. Audra accepted it without hesitation. Seth thought. Donna would have liked her. It wasn't simple. Seth would be the first to say that. if he were the type to discuss it, which he mostly wasn't. He was 41 years old, with a daughter who still sometimes woke up at 2 a.m., asking for her mother, and a grief that he had gotten better at carrying, but not finished carrying. Audra was the CEO of the company he worked for, a structural complication he was fully aware of, and did not pretend was small. She was also 51, and had spent so many years building a version of herself that didn't need anything that she had gotten good at the performance of not needing things. She told him this in the fall, sitting on a bench outside the farmer's market, that had become by then a more deliberate weekly visit. She said it plainly, the way she said most things, and then she looked like she was bracing for him to respond with something that confirmed it was too complicated. He didn't. He said, "I know what it looks like when someone's been carrying something too long on their own. You get efficient, you get quiet about it, you stop expecting anyone to notice." He paused. "I recognize it." She was quiet for a moment. "Because it's you," she said. "Was me," he said. "Still me sometimes." They sat for a while without talking, which was, he had learned, one of the things they were good at together. By October, the Mississauga facility had its best production quarter since the new line installation. 0 seal failures. 3 maintenance issues caught and resolved before they became production faults. Kyle had been promoted to lead technician on the night shift, and on the day his promotion was confirmed, Seth found a handwritten note on his workbench that said, "Thank you for not just telling me what to do. Nobody's done it that way before." Seth pinned it to the wall next to his maintenance log. He thought about the framed quote Donna had cut from a magazine. "Some people carry the whole thing, they just never make a sound." He had moved it from the plant in Brampton to the kitchen in his apartment. He kept it there, on the counter beside the coffee maker, where he could see it in the mornings. He still thought about it. But he thought about it differently now. Because he had spent his whole adult life believing that carrying quietly was a virtue. That not making a sound was its own kind of strength. And maybe it was. But Donna had also laughed loudly at bad jokes, and cried at commercials about dogs, and told Seth regularly, until the morning she didn't wake up, that she loved the particular shape of the life they were building. It had a shape. That was the thing. It hadn't looked like much from the outside. An apartment in Brampton, a maintenance technician, a woman who worked part-time at a pharmacy, a kid who cared too much about juicebox lids. But it had a shape. He knew every edge of it. Grief was not forgetting that shape. Grief was learning how to carry it while leaving room for the shape to keep changing. He was still learning that. On a Thursday in November, 14 months, almost to the day, after he had walked out of the Brampton plant with a grocery list in his pocket, Seth sat in the Mississauga facility break room with a coffee and a silence that felt, for the first time in a long time, like rest rather than emptiness. His phone lit up on the table. "Audra, Mia win her geography B today?" "Seth, second place." "Audra, she'll have thoughts about that." "Seth already does 4 of them detailed." He looked at the phone for a moment. Then he typed, "You should come for dinner Saturday." There was a pause. Not a long one. "Audra, what time?" He smiled. The kind that comes up quietly, from somewhere below the surface, that he used to think he had lost the ability to make. He picked up his coffee. Through the break room window, the floor was running, the new line, steady and even and correctly calibrated, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. Kyle walked past the window and gave him a small nod. Seth nodded back. Outside, across the city, Mia was in school working on a new drawing. She had not yet decided what it would be. Later that evening she would show it to him, and it would be a picture of their kitchen table, with 3 chairs around it. And when he asked about the 3rd chair, she would shrug and say she was just leaving room. She was 8 years old, and somehow already understood the most important thing there was to understand. You carry what you have to carry, you fix what can be fixed, and when the table needs another chair, you leave room for it. That's not giving up on what was, that's just knowing how the shape keeps changing, and choosing, despite everything, to let it.